To continue with this chapter, the philosophy of rebirth, we are actually in para 24. Paragraph 23 tells us about the two elements that go to make the human birth. One, as we discussed, is the cosmic, that is called the Jivatman, and the individual mutable being, which is the Atman. And we have seen the Jivatman is beyond evolution, whereas the Atman or the psychic being is part of the evolution. So he would tell us that human birth is not such a simple thing, that the soul somehow wanders into this world, gets into a human womb and then takes a body for itself. It is in fact under the constant surveillance of the Jivatman, and it is the Jivatman that kind of guides his pattern of his births. So Sri Aurobindo would tell us in this paragraph saying that nor is the human soul, the human individual, a free wanderer capriciously or lightly hastening from field to field. So there is a definite pattern and a definite meaning in every human birth. Now taking up para 24, the universal spirit in things involved in the nations of the physical universe evolves its nature self in a succession of physical forms up the graded series of matter, life, mind and spirit. It emerges first as a secret soul in material forms, quite subject on the surface with the nations. It develops as a soul, still secret, but about to emerge in vital forms that stand on the borders between nations and the partial light of consciousness which is our ignorance. It develops still farther as the initially conscient soul in the animal mind, and finally as the more outwardly conscious but not yet fully conscient soul in man. The consciousness is there throughout in our occult parts of being. The development is in the manifesting nature. This evolutionary development has a universal as well as an individual aspect. Well, now as he has given us the two elements of the human birth in the previous chapter, in the previous paragraph, now he is taking up again two other aspects of human birth, the universal and the individual. How every human birth has again a combination of these two elements. First of all, in this first part of the paragraph, he will discuss how the universal spirit, or as we say, the universal Brahman, itself takes up forms by a graded series. Well, we have all seen that this is the pattern of evolution, how the universal spirit first becomes the inconscient, then it becomes the ignorance. So it develops from form to form each time, as it puts it here, becoming a little more conscious of itself. But in the beginning, in the animal level, it is only initially conscious soul in the animal, and finally as the more outwardly conscious but not yet fully conscious soul in man. So this is the process of evolution that we get, that at each level of evolutionary stage, their consciousness is more and more awakened. It comes to the level of the human being, where the human being is outwardly conscious, and also he is conscious of his inner being, but not yet fully conscious soul. The human being is not yet conscious of his soul. He gets glimpses of his soul. He has the certitude of the existence of something divine within him, but is not yet conscious. Whereas he is conscious fully of the outer world, the outer side, the outer people, the environment, etc. But then that is the process of evolution, that next it wants to become a new personality called the Superman or the new race or whatever name we give it. But the names do not matter, but we can already understand the characteristics of this new personality. That personality would be obviously conscious of his soul. It is almost a kind of a logical conclusion that having come to this level, the new man or the new race has to be one who is based on his soul. We have come halfway, midway to the soul consciousness, and the new man is one who is fully conscious. So that is what we define more or less as a Superman. One who is conscious of his psychic being, one who is more or less governed by the psychic being, just as we the human beings are governed by the mental and the vital, there the person, the Superman is governed by the psychic. But then after that, the next step, we can now logically extend our argument to say that the next step, if not the next species, would be somebody who is conscious of the soul, but the Superman is born of the same process that human beings are born. So the difference here is the birth is the same, but the inner being, that person is more conscious of his soul. But come to the next level, the consciousness of the psychic being remains the same, but the process of birth or the process of the transformation of nature, that starts taking a change. Because, you see, the consciousness has elevated to being conscious of the divine, but the outer nature is yet human, not humane. That is full of ignorance. The way it is born, the same process that we are born now, which means what? It's not the process that is important. It's not necessarily the coming together of a man and a woman that is important. In the laboratory tomorrow, they may create a new baby in the lab. That's not important. The process, scientists may say, well, we don't need any more man and woman coming together. We can take the ovum and the sperm in a lab and put them together and there's a birth. You may do that. Scientists may succeed. But the sum and substance of that is the substance, the genes are the same human genes. Which means that the same ignorance will continue to be there. So tomorrow, if the scientific lab produces a human being in the lab, he is not going to be superior to the normal process by which a human being is born, because the element, the consciousness is the same. But what Sri Aurobindo would say is that the new Superman, whatever may be the process of his taking body, now the outer nature will have to change. So you can see at the next, beyond the Superman 2, if you want to call him, is now changing his outer nature, transformation. Superman 3, now the process of birth is becoming more and more subtle. It may not be the same gross physical birth that we have now. There could be other methods, other means. Superman 4, perhaps whatever the number, would be that Superman who would have changed this nature, and Superman 5 would be who would have changed his nature plus the process of birth. That would be the supramental being. That means no more would he be born the human fashion. Human fashion means the coming together of the ovum and the sperm. It could be lab or it could be any way, it doesn't matter. So these are the kind of Superman 1, Superman 2, Superman 3. The species will advance. Because you see, we have the explanation that just as the human being has advanced, the human man was not what he is today 50,000 years back. But he has had, we even classify them saying that he's the caveman, he's the agricultural man, he's this man, now he says the modern man. So even in the human being there have been levels of advancements. So even in the Superman there will be levels of advancement. So what the mother would call this as apprentice Superman. That means we now in our present sadhana could aspire to be apprentice Superman. Because which means what? To be guided and governed by the soul. Up until then, we are human. We may be brilliant human beings, greatest of poets, greatest of artists, greatest of scientists, greatest of businessmen, whatever. But still, the category is the human. So, therefore, we would say that this is the process of development. And in this same process, he says, this evolutionary development has a universal as well as an individual aspect. The universal develops the grades of its being and the ordered variation of the universality of itself in the series of its evolved forms of being. The individual soul follows the line of this cosmic series and manifests what is prepared in the universality of the spirit. The universal man, the cosmic Purusha in humanity, is developing in the human race the power that has grown into humanity from below it, and shall yet grow to supermind and spirit and become the Godhead in man, who is aware of his true and integral self and the divine universality of his nature. The individual must have followed this line of development. He must have presided over a soul experience in the lower forms of life before he took up the human evolution, as the one capable of assuming in its universality these lower forms of the plant and animal. So must the individual, now human, have been capable of assuming them in his previous stages of existence. He now appears as a human soul, the spirit accepting the inner and outer form of humanity, but is not limited by this form any more than he was limited by the plant or animal forms previously assumed by him. He can pass on from it to a greater self-expression in a higher scale of nature. So it's now you see that I was telling you the comparison. Just as the universal spirit has taken these evolutionary stages from matter to mind, and then it will go further, so too each individual has had this entire evolutionary process behind him. That means not each human being, please remember we are using the word individual. That means the individual soul. So my soul has had exactly the same process as the universe. It started from matter, it went into life, it went into animal, it then came to the human being, and even in the human beings, right from caveman to the present man, even in the present man, I don't know how many lives my psychic been to, and at last and ultimately I am now born as Mr. X. But just as I have had so many births in the past, so too, he says, I can continue to have not only further births, remember, further births we know there will be plenty of rebirths, but further evolution of forms. So he would say that he is not limited by this form any more than he was limited by the plant or animal. So now what is the parallel we have seen? Just as the universe has proceeded from inconscient to the semi-conscious, self-conscious human being, so too the individual has proceeded from inconscience to ignorance to all these levels and come to this. So individual, now we can connect them as that individual is the frontal expression of the universal. So they are completely interrelated. In fact, oftentimes it is the individual who gives a lead to the universal. But he will not surpass. That's the meaning of the avatar. That he gives a lead to the next universal jump in the scale of evolution. So he goes to the brink of the next step, pulls the present step upward to the next evolutionary stage, and then he leaves for the universal to take over. So this is the meaning and almost, the secret of the avatarhood, that he leads the evolutionary process to the next stage of evolution, and then he would say, let nature now develop it. That's why, when there's an avatar, there's a tremendous movement in earth nature, because he has hastened the process to leap to the next stage. So as if the whole earth spirit is ignited and it wants to move forward to catch up to that leader who has left that beautiful new consciousness. So there is always this kind of a tremendous movement. You see, last we know about, in our own history, about Sri Krishna. And when he had come also, there was not only the Kurukshetra that we know in his own lifetime, but afterwards, you read Sri Aurobindo's notes in Bengali when he writes about the Gita and he writes about Sri Krishna. For almost 1,000 years, how the whole country was whipped up by a new activity of devotion. It was as if the whole of Bharat was really lifted up into a wave of devotion. So that is what the avatar does. He always whips up a new movement and earth moves forward. So that is the relation between the individual and the universal. Now he is giving a contrary supposition to say that to suppose otherwise would be to suppose that the spirit which now presides over the human soul experience was originally formed by a human mentality, and the human body exists by that and cannot exist apart from it, cannot ever go below or above it. In fact, it would then be reasonable to suppose that it is not immortal but has come into existence by the appearance of the human mind and body in the evolution and would disappear by their disappearance. Well, it's a supposition, an argument expressing those views which tell us that this question of the process of the soul taking birth from the beginning of matter into life, into animal, all that is not there. There is only imagination. But as some religions would say, soul has come into the human body with the birth of the human body. We have seen before the theory of religions. They say no, all that evolutionary process doesn't exist. The soul comes into the body, and when the human body dies, it goes. So that way the soul is not immortal. Whereas in the explanation that we have seen, it is immortal. Right from the beginning of evolution it is there. But here it is created with the body and mind and vital, and when this outer envelope is withdrawn, then the soul goes away. So he says that way, but body and mind are not the creators of the spirit. The spirit is the creator of the mind and body. It developed these principles out of its being. It is not developed into being out of them. It is not a compound of their elements or a resultant of their meeting. If it appears to evolve out of mind and body, that is because it gradually manifests itself in them and not because it is created by them or exists by them. As it manifests, they are revealed as subordinate terms of its being and are to be finally taken up out of their present imperfection and transformed into visible forms and instruments of the spirit. So this is the argument that Sri Aurobindo is giving, that you see, this question of the spirit or the individual soul, the human soul, coming into the body and then leaving with the death of the body is incorrect. Because that would mean what? Philosophically, it would tend to mean that the soul is created by the birth of body and mind. That means the soul is under the call of the body and the mind. Sri Aurobindo says that is a wrong understanding. The spirit is not to be created by body and mind. The spirit or the soul pre-exists the body and the mind. And now the human being thinks of the soul because he has a mind. He can analyze himself. And this kind of a self-awareness leads some religious thinkers to say, oh, because you see, the animal is not conscious of the soul. It's a human being who is conscious of the soul. That means the soul has come with the birth of the human body. But Sri Aurobindo would explain, on the contrary, put this something under this, that on the contrary, it is the soul which has come to the level of the human birth, and through the mind, it is now expressing itself. And so he says, if it appears to evolve out of mind and body, that is because it gradually manifests itself in them. You see, till now the soul in the animal and the plant did not manifest itself in the vital of the animal, in the physical vital of the plant. I mean, there were not sufficient instruments to be aware of the soul. But the first time is the mental consciousness, which is, if not fully sufficient, good enough to be aware of the soul. So the soul says, now I've got somebody called the mind or something called the mind which can receive me. But lower than the mind, the vital and the physical could not receive the psychic being or the soul. So Sri Aurobindo says, now in the level of the mind, the soul finds an apt recipient. So is expressing itself. And if as it manifests there, reveal as subordinate terms of its being are to be finally taken up out of the present imperfection. And as evolution grows, we'll understand that these instruments have to be perfected, transformed into their original aspects. Our conception of the spirit is of something which is not constituted by name and form, but assumes various forms of body and mind according to the various manifestations of its whole being. This it does here by a successive evolution. It evolves successive forms and successive strata of consciousness, for it is not bound always to assume one form and no other, or to possess one kind of mentality which is its sole possible subjective manifestation. The soul is not bound by the formula of mental humanity. It did not begin with that and will not end with it. It had a pre-human past. It has a superhuman future. So we see the argument that it is bound to go towards a greater future than the human birth. And so let's not think that the human birth is the ultimate form for the soul. What we see of nature and of human nature justifies this view of a birth of the individual soul from form to form until it reaches the human level of manifested consciousness, which is its instrument for rising to yet higher levels. We see that nature develops from stage to stage, and in each stage takes up its past and transforms it into stuff of its new development. We see too that human nature is of the same make. All the earth past is there in it. It has an element of matter taken up by life, an element of life taken up by mind, an element of mind which is being taken up by spirit. The animal is still present in its humanity. The very nature of the human being presupposes a material and a vital stage which prepared his emergence into mind, and an animal past which molded a first element of his complex humanity. And let us not say that this is because material nature developed by evolution is life and his body and his animal mind, and only afterwards did a soul descend into the form so created. There is a certain truth behind this idea, but not the truth with that formula, which that formula would suggest. Well, I think we have a similar idea before, that there is the entire earth past in the human birth also, because we have behind us matter, we have behind us the animal, and of course we have behind us the plant life too. And in the human being we have all the three: matter, plant and the animal. So we are a kind of an element of everything. So what Sri Aurobindo is telling us is, this is the pattern of evolution itself. Evolution does not discard the past. It always takes up the past and transfigures it to a new step. Just as it happened in the past, when there was this plant life, it did not discard matter. Matter was very important, because out of matter it makes its body, its roots, its branches, its fruits. But it is not the same rock matter, inconscient. It already vibrates differently, it has a different texture, it begins to get a color, it begins to be sensitive. When there is, we have this, some plants near the post office, you will see, when the sun sets, all the plants, they sleep, all the leaves, they sleep. When there's sunrise tomorrow morning, the leaves will open up. So you see, they're sensitive to light, sensitive to water, sensitive to emotion, sensitive to your touch, your love. So, but seeing that is the same matter. Similarly, animals, and similarly, the human being. So there is, at each stage, there is a transformation. You see, the animal is known for its vital. The human being has imbibed the same vital, but he has put on the vital morality, ethics, religion. So he has kind of, tried to control the vital. Although it's the same urge of the animal, but now because of the mind has tried to manipulate the vital with its ethics, morality, religion, etc. So the entire human endeavor has been till now to control, modify, to transform, if I can use a strong word which is not true actually. It's more to control. I think the basic thing is to control. How much has succeeded, that's a different thing. So our entire human culture has been a control and an expression of the vital. All your music and dance and painting is nothing but a higher vital. And all your ethics and religion is nothing but the control of the lower vital. So between the two, human civilization has grown. And of course, when it was a bit free from this vital, the mind could really produce its own beautiful flowers of poetry and higher music and higher these things. So you see, everywhere the lower is transformed, is never rejected. So Sri Aurobindo is telling us that all the earth past is there, but at each level, the lower is taken up by the higher. Taken up means transformed, changed. And then he would say, for that supposes a gulf between soul and body, between soul and life, between soul and mind, which does not exist. There is no body without soul, no body that is not itself a form of soul. This is one of the central lines in this entire chapter, which really I noted. A very blunt declaration that there is no body without soul, and no body that is not itself a form of soul. Matter itself is substance and power of spirit, and could not exist if it were anything else. For nothing can exist which is not substance and power of Brahman. And if matter then still more clearly and certainly life and mind must be that, and ensouled by the presence of the Spirit. If matter and life had not already been ensouled, man could not have appeared, or only as an intervention or an accident, not as a part of the evolutionary order. So he is explaining all this to explain the second part of the famous sentence, that no body that is not itself a form of soul. The first one we can understand, there is no body without a soul. Yeah, we have said every body must have. Body means not just the human body, every individual form that's called the body has a soul. When it comes to human beings, we say we have a psychic being. That's the only difference. Otherwise, every body has a soul. But then the second part is more difficult to understand. No body that is not itself a form of soul. How is it a form of soul? Then he is explaining that matter itself is substance and power of spirit and could not exist if it were anything else. Because all body is a form of soul, because it is Brahman who has become matter. So what is this form? It is the body of the soul. Because it's Brahman who has put upon himself this material creation. So matter is nothing but the body of the divine. It's a concrete, solid body of the divine. So therefore we can say that every form itself is a form of soul. And then he would say, if matter is a form of Brahman, obviously life and mind are also similar forms. We arrive then necessarily at this conclusion that human birth is a term at which the soul must arrive in a long succession of rebirths, and that it has had for its previous and preparatory terms in the succession the low forms of life upon earth. It has passed through the whole chain that life has strung in the physical universe on the basis of the body, the physical principle. Then the further question arises whether humanity once attained, this succession of rebirths still continues, and if so, how, by what series, or by what alternations. And first we have to ask whether the soul, having once arrived at humanity, can go back to the animal life and body, a retrogression which the old popular theories of transmigration have supposed to be an ordinary movement. It seems impossible that it should go back with any entirety. So this is one of the crucial questions that many have confused, because many religious theories have given us this explanation that the soul can go back to the animal life and body. The main question, of course, is the first one which Sri Aurobindo is saying, whether humanity once attained this succession of rebirths still continues, and if so, by what series or by what alternations. First question is, after the soul has reached the human level, will it continue to have succession of rebirths as human beings? First answer, some religious old beliefs say no. There could be a possibility that you are born as an animal. There is a kind of a retrogression. You go back. Sri Aurobindo is very firm on that. He says, it seems impossible that it should go back with any entirety. See, this argument is very, very strong and very important. And for this reason, that the transit from animal to human life means a decisive conversion of consciousness, quite as decisive as the conversion of the vital consciousness of the plant into the mental consciousness of the animal. It is surely impossible that a conversion so decisive made by nature should be reversed by the soul and the decision of the spirit, whether a spirit within her come, as it were, to naught. The simple logic is, the soul has taken such a leap, such a tremendous conversion, just as it did from plant to animal, and from the animal to human birth. It's such a big leap, and conversion cannot be retraced. He says it's too big a leap for the soul to come back to the animal birth. So he says that's not possible, because it is in nature, such a reversal is unthinkable of. It could only be possible for human souls, supposing such to exist, in whom the conversion was not decisive. Souls that had developed far enough to occupy or assume a human body, but not enough to ensure the safety of this assumption, not enough to remain secure in its achievement and faithful to the human type of consciousness. Or there could be a possibility that such a reversal is possible. But one side he says, he uses twice the word impossible and not possible, and now he says there is a possibility. What is the answer? Why is he saying so? But look at his answer. He says, if the soul had not developed far enough to occupy or assume a human body, but not enough to ensure the safety. Say, for example, the soul has just taken its first human birth. It has leaped to the human level, but it has not yet consolidated its position as a human birth. It has not yet taken so many human births that now you can say, confirm that I am going to take human birth and nothing more. But if it's the first one or two births, that means the link with the animal is still strong. The human birth is not yet confirmed. So in such a situation, the soul could go back to the animal, because the new position is not yet assured and guaranteed. So in that position, or at most, there might be, supposing certain animal propensities to be vehement enough to demand a separate satisfaction, quite of their own kind, a sort of partial rebirth, a loose holding of an animal form by a human soul, with an immediate subsequent reversion to its normal progression. So there is a second possibility, and that is a frightening one. That supposing there are certain animal propensities to be vehement enough to demand a separate satisfaction. I mean, this can happen once the soul leaves the body. If there are these vital animal propensities very strong in a person, one of them is normally called the sex drive. Because the lowest vital is the sex drive. If that propensity is really strong, then there could be that there is a demand for a separate satisfaction. See these words, do not miss them. Separate satisfaction, a partial rebirth, a loose holding. Very important phrases. That means, if there is this animal propensity to be vehement enough, then the soul after leaving the body would have to come to the animal, but not as an animal birth. It will not really start with an animal birth. It may leave with its vital sheath, if I can understand. The soul with its vital sheath may go to an animal and occupy that animal and satiate its vital propensity. And then it may, as it says, there is a subsequent reversion to its normal progression. So after this animal propensity is somehow satisfied and satiated, Then the soul gets liberated and it bounces back to its human birth and then goes on. So these animal propensities are one possibility that the soul is forced to take a human animal birth for certain time, for certain period, which is a tremendous torture you can imagine after it has become human for it to go back because of the human animal propensities. It has no choice, it goes back. So that's a terrible torture, but it has to fulfill that and then get back to its normal progression. The movement of nature is always sufficiently complex for us not to deny dogmatically such a possibility. And if it be a fact, then there may exist this modicum of truth behind the exaggerated popular belief, which assumes an animal rebirth of the soul once lodged in man to be quite as normal and possible as a human reincarnation. But whether the animal reversion is possible or not, the normal law must be the recurrence of birth in new human forms for a soul that has once become capable of humanity. So it says, whatever the other religious belief, there is a modicum of truth. The little truth is that because of this animal propensity, the soul has to come back, but that is not the normal routine of a rebirth. Once it comes and confirmed as a human body, the soul will continue to be a human body, but in special circumstances, such as the vital propensity, it may have to visit an animal body for a while. Otherwise, he says, that's not a possibility. So this has been one of the, in India, I think most of the religions in India, Hindu religion, I don't know about the Christianity, we have all this belief that if you do something wrong, you are cursed, saying that in your next life you will be born like a dog or a horse or a cat or a goat. That kind of frightens everybody. My God, I should not do that next life, I do not. Religion takes a modicum of truth and invents all these things, so frighten us off. And I think it's good sometimes because our vital needs to get a good kick or a good fright sometimes. So if we tell them philosophically, life divine, chapter so-and-so teaches, nobody understands. But if you say, you'll be born like a dog, you see the bitch there, and you say, oh, Baba, I will not do that, thank you.